Well, it was just said that Lee is pretty popular because look at, we have a packed house. We don't even have enough seats. So I want to thank everybody for coming, and I also want to thank Carol and her crew for offering this space. I think this is a great series that has been started, and I hope it continues every year. So I'm Stephanie. I'm president of the Liberty Grove Historical Society. I have just a couple announcements for our society. This upcoming Monday, which the date is the 17th, we have a wonderful program on the first people of Northern Door, the Potawatomi families of Liberty Grove. So it's going to be a great program. Speaking of programs, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I don't want to forget this. In August, we are expecting a packed house for our program in August. It's the third Monday of the month.
21st.
The 21st. We have a book signing for a new book from Kathy Springer. She's going to be there early at 6:30. This is at our August meeting, and we are told it's going to be the Grassy family is going to be speaking, and the Grassy family is very large, and they're all coming. So it's going to be a packed house. That's in August, so just to forewarn you. Our next biggest thing that we have going on for the Historical Society is our tractor show. Yay! The grounds are looking fabulous right now. It's the 22nd and 23rd. And hi, Don and Diane. Be there, be square. Potato blossoms, usual food. It'll be a great time. Lots of tractors too. So come join us at the top of the hill. Our next program here is going to be in August 16th. One last little note from me is we have our wonderful raffle tickets, and I'm just going to put this plug out there. These raffle tickets usually cover most of our insurance for the year. Our insurance at the top of the hill, I'm going to tell everybody the insurance cost is over $7,000 this year. So we need to sell a lot of raffle tickets. So. And I didn't want to do a planned speech because if I did, then I'd cry. But I moved here in 1994. And in 1994, I had a mom and dad. But in 1994, I gained another mom and dad. And that is Ruth and Lee Telfer. You can go to my phone, it comes up, DC mom or DC dad. I get a text, okay, I'll be honest. I get multiple texts every day from mom. And I am so excited to have him interviewed. And I'll make sure at the end of the interview, if we haven't covered everything that I think needs to be covered, because I've learned a lot about Lee throughout the years, I'll make sure that I ask. But the one thing that I want to say about Lee is he has given his heart to this community, both him and Ruth. And they have done hours and hours and decades of volunteer work here in Northern Door. So I'm going to leave it to Carol now.
All right. Anyway, I was telling Lee earlier that I have known him my whole life. I've known he existed my whole life, but I don't know a lot of details about he and Ruthie. And his family has deep roots here in the county. So why don't you go ahead and just talk to us about where your family came from, where they settled, kind of the early years.
My grandfather graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 1917. He had a job with a nursery in Fort Atkinson, which was his home area. And they owned what was called the Ellison Bay Orchard Company, which is all the orchards that used to be up where the towers are now. And he was offered a job to manage that. So he moved up here in 1917. So.
Lee, we're going to ask you to speak a little bit louder if you could.
Okay.
Okay.
They moved up here in 1917 and lived in they had an army tent set up for them, nothing else. So they had to go rent a house for the winter. My grandmother was expecting my father, so he was born in 1917. She went back to Chicago. And since that time, they've been in the orchard business. My grandfather started buying property north of Ellison Bay in about 1934. And he met Jens Jensen, and they became great friends. And they partnered in part of the property is now the clearing. And that's, eventually he moved up there. They actually raised chickens on the property before they put the orchard up there.
So the orchard was on near the clearing?
Yeah, across the road from the clearing.
So where Fitzgerald Park is, kind of in that area?
In that particular 40-acre piece, he bought everything that was left of that 40.
So this was your grandfather? Okay. And where did they live during that time?
They lived up at Ellison Bay, they lived in a house the first winter in Sister Bay. But then they lived at Ellison Bay Orchard Company, and they lived in what is the stone house. It's the pottery people live in it now. They lived there until sometime in the 30s. They built a chicken coop, and with my grandfather eventually lifted it up, built a stone foundation around it, and built what was known as our apple packing shed, which is another pottery shop up there, Ellison Bay Pottery.
Oh, up on Garrett Bay Road.
And they lived in the house they raised, and they raised chickens in the building that became our apple packing shed.
Chickens for meat or eggs or both?
I don't know that. I know they raised chickens because my aunt was out in Minnesota with her husband, and she went to a grocery store to buy something, and they had two prices on chickens. And she said, "What's the difference between the two prices?" And he said, "One is dressed and one, it's not dressed." Anyway, one is the whole chicken, and one was all dressed. And she said, "I'll take the cheaper one." He said, "Lady, if you can draw that chicken," he said, "I'll give it to you." Well, they ate free. He didn't know she did that as a teenager.
Interesting. So how many kids did your grandfather have?
Two.
Your grandparents, two. So one was your dad, and then?
My Aunt Dottie.
Okay.
And she moved to California.
Okay. And then your parents, how many siblings were in your family?
I'm sorry.
How many siblings do you have in your family?
I had one for me. And my mother had a brother and sister. And they were from the southwestern corner of Wisconsin at Belmont.
And so the family business was basically the orchards and the...
Yes.
And was up by Clay Bay Pottery, was that all the orchards too, and the orchards on Garrett Bay?
The ones by Clay Bay Pottery were owned by the Ellison Bay Orchard Company, and I can't remember the two fellows' names that owned that. They owned that, and then my grandfather owned everything else until it was incorporated, and then it became a family corporation.
Okay. And where did you grow up? Where was your family home?
Except for the 2 years I was in the Army, I lived my entire life within a quarter of a mile of where I am on the Garrett Bay Road.
Good place to be. Yeah. Okay, let's see. So you grew up here. Talk a little bit about what it was like growing up as a kid, where you went to school, kind of describe, the school buildings and things like that, your education.
Okay. Well, I started school when I was 6 years old, I guess, and I went to Ellison Bay School, which is where Fitzgerald Park is now, And the building sat right about where the gazebo is. And I went to school there for 8 years.
So it was first through 8th?
First through
kindergarten?
8th.
Was there kindergarten?
No, there was no such thing as kindergarten when I grew up.
They keep getting them younger and younger. And so was Ellison Bay the only, I think the Newport School was there too, right? So
When I was in 5th grade, Ellison Bay merged with Newport. And the prior to that time, it was grades 1 through 4 in one room, and grades 5 through 8 in the other room. Gordy Brand taught the upper room, and Emily Dobner taught the lower room. What happened is that the town built 3 schools all about the same time. And I believe it was around 1934. 17 and 6, no, it would have been before that, it was around 25. His dad went to school at the cookery over here, up the road.
The cooking school?
The first day he started school, they carried all the books up to the new school, up to Fitzgerald Park. And that's when all those 3 schools were built that year.
So it was Ellison Bay School, Newport, and what was the third?
Wildwood.
Wildwood, and that's out on Old Stage?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
That's where the town hall is now.
Oh,
So,
okay. I didn't know that.
and when I was in school, we used to play basketball against those other 2 schools. Oh, they actually had Appleport too, but that was built prior to that, I believe. We played basketball outdoors, except in the winter. We played at Files Hall, which is now Mink River Basin. And in the area that's the game room to the east, that was, and the kitchen, that was the gym, as well as roller skating rink.
Let's bring back the roller skating rink. So, about how many kids were in each class then? I know there was 1 through 4.
I had 4 in my class, and there were, my sister was a year behind, and I think she had about 6 or 7 in her class.
So the whole school only had,
Yeah, I don't know. The class before me, I think, there were probably 5 in. So that's an average of about 6 per class, so that's 24, 48 roughly.
wow. And my kids thought their school classrooms were small. Had 30 to 40 kids or whatever.
You didn't get much time in class. You spent most of your desk sitting doing your homework, which you were supposed to be doing.
So talk about the classroom. What was the classroom itself like?
Well, basically, they had desks up front, and there was an arm on it. You sat on the chairs up front. You sat on a wooden chair, and it had a little arm that stuck out, and that was what you had for that. And the desks were they weren't fastened to the floor. They were fastened to wooden strips. So they were all fastened pretty much together, and they had legs that went down. My aunt actually taught school at Ellison Bay before I was there, and one of the students wasn't too cooperative, so she tied his shoelaces to the desk legs.
I don't think you could do that now. Get in a lot of trouble for that. So the desk was here. What about someone who was left-handed? Did they have left-handed desks?
No.
No? It had to be right-handed.
There were no left-handed people.
Really?
Well,
You just figured it out, or?
yeah.
You had to be
You
right-handed?
figure out how to write with your right hand, or you had to work across your thumb. So.
And what kind of different classes did you have? Like, obviously, like math and maybe arithmetic.
Yeah, we went through math, and it was arithmetic then, and reading, and I think there was a spelling class, but I didn't do very well in that one. My mother found out one day when she came to school, and she got in my desk, and she found my spelling book. I was in big trouble.
So you had books that you worked out of, like workbooks?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And what kind of, like, pencils always, or?
We had pencils. We had them. I still got a pencil sharpener that came out of Ellison Bay School. I think I might have a couple of them. And it was when you stuck it in and turned the crank on it and sharpen your pencil. And recesses were, we had recess in the morning, and we had a half hour for lunch, and we had another recess in the afternoon. And they were scheduled for 10 minutes, but they were usually about 20 minutes, 25 minutes.
Is that playground equipment that's up at Fitzgerald Park, was that some of the original still? That's there?
No. What happened is that when I got out of the Army in 1968, the men's club had, I'll back up a little farther. When I was in grade school, we had cookie sales and cookie and candy sales. And with that money, we raised enough to buy a push lawnmower. And so the kids would get to go out and mow the lawn. And I was probably in 5th grade at that time. And there were only 2 of us that could get the lawnmower going. So everybody got a chance to go out and mow, but if they couldn't get the lawnmower going, they came back in. And then Mr. Brand would tell either this other fellow or myself, was Bill Ganane, or myself to go out and mow the lawn. So we spent a lot of time mowing the lawn.
That's a good gig. That's what I'm thinking. Good gig.
In the back, where the ball field is now, there was all hummocks. And I don't know, it was like the trees had been pushed out, and there were pits. There was a pit, and then there was a pile of dirt alongside of it. And Mr. Brand talked your dad into coming in and leveling that field off. And he leveled that off, and we played football or baseball there. When I was in about 8th grade or 7th grade, the Ellison Bay Men's Club disbanded, and they gave us all our baseball equipment. And so we played baseball while I was in 7th grade. And in the following year, they would not allow baseball in grade school. So the boys had to do their own baseball. And Mr. Brand would go down in the lawn in front on the Garrett Bay or the School Road intersection, and he'd play softball with the girls and younger kids down there. And so we played up there. And then there was a manual arts building that sat just behind where the well is now. And when I was 5 years old, Beverly Lynn brought my sister and I to school. And all of a sudden there was a whole bunch of excitement. And we all got to run outside. And here was a student that was carrying a frying pan back to what was called the Manual Arts Building. And he had a pine snake wrapped around his leg. He was your dad.
Was it really?
Yep.
Oh, that's funny.
I kind of got a feeling it was a setup operation, maneuver, but it got all the girls excited anyway. We were all screaming, you know.
What was the age with you and my dad?
About 8 years, I believe.
Okay.
I didn't know. That's the only thing I had to gauge it by. So.
Okay. Interesting.
But,
So what was the Manual Arts Building for? What kind of things were in that?
Yeah, that school was originally, there were 3 rooms in it. There were originally the 2 grade school rooms, and then there was a junior high.
Right at that same property?
Yep.
Oh.
And there was one room was lower than the other ones. You came in the front door, you went up the steps, went in the front door, and there was girls' bathroom was down to the right, and the boys' bathroom was down to the left. But then as you went off the side, there was another room that was about 3 or 4 feet underground. So it was a half story, and they taught 2 years of high school in that there, and that was an industrial arts room. And I don't know too much more about it than that. But then when I got out of the Army, the men's club was running the skating rink. They had started a skating rink excuse me, on the basketball court up where the skating rink is now. And I joined the men's club, and we decided to, Lee Johnson and Bob Highlander were the two main ones that were doing the work. We had to do it at night. We did it with a garden hose.
Bob Highlander taught me how to ice skate.
Yeah. And we moved the Manual Arts building up to where the building is now, I should say. Your dad moved it up there. And then he dug a trench up there to get water up there so we could flood it and so on. And that was there for years. And then the men's club decided to improve on the building and do some more work. And the skating rink was paved and so on. So the men's club built the building up there that is now the skating rink building. And part of the theory behind that was that the men's club needed a place to store their property for the Ellison Bay Days parade and so on, stuff and everything they had, which is now the service club. And so that's how that came about. But your dad did all that work for us. So we're exceptionally grateful for that. But then eventually they leveled that field off. Same time the skating rink was paved again, they leveled that field off some more because it sloped down. So your dad hauled fill in there to build it up so it was a level field, level playing field. And the Lutheran Aid for Association, Lutheran Aid, can't think of the exact name, but they had a grant and they gave us the money for the fencing that's around the little field. Unfortunately, there was no Lutherans in the men's club. So we gave somebody an honorary membership for a year. It was a Lutheran. And
there's ways to get around those rules, right?
Yeah.
So going back to did everybody bring their lunch then, or was there a lunch room? Everybody brought their own.
You brought your own lunch, yeah.
Okay. And when you got finished in Ellison Bay School, where did you go after that?
Gibraltar.
Okay. And Gibraltar was or just high school?
Just high school, yes. There was a time when my dad was in school that he went to Gibraltar for a year, I think. I'm not sure. No, he didn't go there for a year. I don't know why. But he went to Sturgeon Bay for 2 years, and then he went to Fort Atkinson for the 2 more years for his high school. And I'm not sure what the deal was with Gibraltar. I think there was some kind of a high school there, but I'm not sure how big it was or how many students they allowed in it.
At Gibraltar?
At Gibraltar, but it was downtown. It was by the old school. It was right next to the town hall, right in that area. I don't remember exactly where it was now, but.
So you ended up at Gibraltar
Yes.
for the full high school?
Yes.
And how many kids were in a class there?
We had 61 that graduated in 1961. So the class behind us was a little larger, and I believe the class ahead of us was a little larger too.
So that was all the little small schools that funneled into that area.
Eventually what they did, they consolidated the schools. So when Newport moved in with Ellison Bay, that was the first one. And then eventually they closed down Wildwood and they split some of the students up there. Yeah, but I was out of grade school by then, so I'm not sure exactly how they did it. But I know our son never went to school up here. And he went to grade school in Sister Bay.
Yeah, that's where I went to school too. But some of my siblings went to Ellison Bay. So some of my older sisters went to Ellison Bay for a couple of years, and then they ended up at Sister Bay.
Okay.
So, and then I think the last year, because Barry and John, didn't they end up going to Gibraltar early?
Yes.
Because they shut down the grade school in Sister Bay.
Yeah.
So a lot of little schools around. If you wander through the back streets, you'll see a lot of those old schools.
Yep. And I should say Ellison Bay and Newport merged when I was in 5th grade. And then we had 3 classrooms there. It was the first 2 and then the next 3, and the last 3. But luckily they did it when I was in 5th grade, so I kept the same teacher. If I would have been a year later, I would have had to wait a year to get to him. But.
And so after high school, where did you end up?
I went to Platteville, University of Wisconsin, and got a degree there I was taking surveying.
Surveying. And so you were there for 4 years?
I was a little long. I was there a little longer
because of the spelling? Sorry, I couldn't help it.
In high school, we had a math teacher that was up in years, and we had a little green book in trig class, and we got 3/4 of the way through that in a year. You know, when I got to high school, I had taken trig, so they put me in a calculus class. Well, I was totally lost, and so I had to drop out, and I had taken a chemistry class and everything concurrent with the calculus, or with the calculus. I had to drop out, so I basically did almost nothing the first semester of school. And then I had to wait for the classes to come in sync with my schedule, because they only offered some of them on odd years. And when I had to take trig over, and we went completely through that little book in 6 weeks. And so it was kind of a setback for me there. I spent some time in school not doing anything, and then I had to take analytic geometry. They only offered that every 3rd semester. So I spent another semester along the line someplace that I just couldn't schedule a full schedule of classes, so it just didn't work out.
And then after Platteville, where did you?
U.S. Army. They sent me a notice, said, come and see me. I was out in California. My Aunt Dottie gave my sister and I each trips when we graduated from college. It's a graduation present. My sister flew out as soon as she graduated and flew around, and they went with my aunt and 2 cousins, and they went around the U.S. and went to Washington, D.C., Florida, all different places. And they came back here, and it was right in cherry season. And it was my turn to leave, and that was the first cherry season. I missed most of the work. And then I went out to California with my aunt and 2 cousins, and I had met up with a fellow at the bar. About 2 weeks before my aunt got back here, and he was going to California, but he didn't know when. And so I told him what my plans were, and he said, okay. And he left about the same time we did, but he drove straight out there, and he got there before we did. So then we stayed in California with my aunt and cousins for a while, a couple weeks, and then we traveled. We went to Las Vegas, and then we went down to Los Angeles to see the Hickey Boys. We stayed with them for a while. And then while we were there, my draft notes came. I got a phone call from my dad. Said, "You got to be back by."
And so where did you go?
When?
Where did you have to go for that? In the Army? Mm-hmm.
I went to Fort Polk. Fort Polk. We had no idea where we were. Jim Tischler was the only other one I knew, and there were 2 other fellows from Sturgeon Bay. We got on the bus, and that was it. We got on the bus, and we went to Milwaukee, and from there on, we had no idea where we were, what we were doing, what day it was, or anything else. We just went to Fort Polk. They didn't tell us where we were, because we went in at night. It was dark. And one of the fellows thought he saw a sign that said Fort Polk, but he wasn't sure. So we were there for a week. And then I went to Fort Hood for the rest of my training. But I got injured in basic training, so I never even finished basic training. But I had my choice. I could come home or go in the hospital. And so I went in the hospital for a couple months, and then they got my back straightened out, and I couldn't do anything. was kind of funny because I went back to the same company and they told me I was supposed to go up to see the division headquarters and he said, "Where's your stripes?" I said, "I don't have any, sir." He said, "Why don't you have any stripes?" I said, "Because I'm an E2." He said, "Get back to your company." I don't even know what I was up there for. 2 weeks later, I was in an office next to him as a clerk typist, and I can't tell you too much more about it. Because I wasn't supposed to be there.
Oh, top secret information. Okay, so then when you left there, did you come right back to Door County then?
Yes. Yep. I was there for 2 years. Came back and started surveying. I didn't know what I was going to do, and I was looking for a job. Well, I got out a little bit early for seasonal employment, and I was working at the fruit growers for cherry season. And Ralph Thomas got a surveying license. I found out then, but before I found that out, they were looking for bus drivers. So I took a job as a bus driver.
Bus driver for? Oh, for school.
Yeah. And they switched me around a little bit because I get through my roads faster than a couple other drivers.
Can you hear? Can you guys hear in the back?
He needs to speak up, yeah.
Yeah, I think we got to talk a little bit louder.
Okay.
You do. I have a very loud voice.
But they switched me around on the routes, and one day I had the Sister Bay route because the driver was having knee surgery, and when I picked up Ruth, she told her girlfriend, she says, "That's the I'm with Mary." First day of school.
You picked her up on the...
Hit her house up.
Oh, but wait, how old were you?
She told her girlfriend that's the guy she was going to marry.
Oh. So what was the time frame there then between when she said that and when you guys started dating?
Oh, I don't know. It's later in the year. I don't know. Spring. I don't know. A few months.
Few months.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about Ruth, because I have always known her. She's a very colorful, wonderful person and a big part of the community. So tell us a little bit about Ruth.
I can't tell you a whole lot of timeline, but we got married 2 years later after she got out of school. But I told her that if she wanted to get married, she had to go to some sort of school, mainly to get her away from Door County. And I figured that was part of the experience, because if she got married and decided she didn't like it in Door County or wanted to go off to Milwaukee or wherever, so she went to school to be a baby nurse in Milwaukee, and she got her degree there, and then we got married, and she worked for Dr. Sheets in Sturgeon Bay, and opening came along at Bailey Bank, and so I said, "Why don't you apply for that?" So she did, and she got the job. And
what year was that?
1970.
Wow, so she was with the bank a long time.
Yes.
A really long time.
Yeah. So she worked for the bank, and then they built the 2 branches here in Egg Harbor, and Lucille Soames had probably seniority over her, and Lucille wanted to be in Ellison Bay, even though Ruth wanted it, but that she didn't argue with Lucille. We got along fine. And she took the Egg Harbor job, and then when Lucille retired, Ruth got the opportunity to come to Ellison Bay, so that's where she did all of her rest of her career.
It was so much fun at the bank whenever you went in. Happy, warm, always knew everything going on in town.
Oh, yeah.
So did you do the surveying job then for
Yes.
your whole life?
I did it for 43 years.
Right.
The only thing I did longer than that was the fire department. So, it's a volunteer fire department, paid on call technically, but I joined the fire department before I got married even, and learned that if we had a fire station, if anybody had a house within 5 miles of the fire station, I think it was 5 miles, they get a reduction in their insurance. And not only that, but the town would get reimbursed from the insurance companies for, so they get a pretty good chunk of money back from the fire department now because they're a qualified fire department. And I talked to my dad, who's on the town board, and I said, you know, just get a fire department going. And up here.
Hold on a second. I feel like you guys still can't hear. Can you? Is there a way to turn up the mic?
No? Okay. I'll try and talk louder.
Right here.
There we go.
It's just not carrying.
Okay, I'm sorry.
There.
Okay, I'll hold
You're
it.
going to have to hold it right there.
Yeah, you don't have to. So then Dad was on the Dad was on the town board, and so I talked him into buying some property, and he bought the Fruit Growers Co-op, which they were not operating up here anymore, and eventually bought Gene Will's lot alongside of it, and they built the fires, and then nothing happened. He got off the town board. Nothing happened for a couple of years, and so I ran for the town board to try and get a fire station up here. That was my main goal. And fortunately, Walter Severson quit being postmaster up here. He was on the corner right over here, next to the cookery. And so we had to build a town post office for the town, or else lose it. And so I was managed to talk the other two members into building a fire station. So we built a fire station alongside over there in 1974.
So the fire station was right where the Ellison Bay post office is, and the extra piece over there.
Part of the same building. Actually, the one large garage door that's there, that was the north door. And there were 2 more doors. And so that's how we got the fire department there. And then they built another one. They replaced it in 2014. A new one, the present one, was built.
So one of my favorite memories about the fire station is when they would pull out all the trucks, and we would have the old Ellison Bay Days show, the talent show.
Oh yeah.
That was a big thing growing up, to have everybody, you know, just fun. You pulled out, everybody, the community would come, and the talent show would go on. That was a good time.
Sure.
So.
Those were the days. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work, and we had a lot of members that stood up to it. But it was one of the things that the men's club did accomplish is that they had Ellison Bay Days, and the first one was in 1966, and all the men grew beards.
Really?
So, yes.
That's funny.
And it was my last year in college, so I had Abraham Lincoln type style beard. And
So was there a contest or something then?
oh yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I think so. I'm pretty sure there was, yeah. But everybody did. All the men in Ellison Bay grew beards. It was kind of interesting.
Along those same lines, the old Ellison Bay Days, can you talk a little bit about some of the things that happened during old Ellison Bay Days way back?
Well, we had a parade, which eventually went from one end of town to the other, and then they turned it around a few years later and ran it the other direction, and that was a complete failure. So don't run the parade south. The parade creates a traffic jam on the south end of town, and people are trying to get by it. But anyway, we had a raffle. The men's club did a raffle, and the first thing that they raffled off was a 30-30 rifle, and I've got one of the first ones, or I had one of the first ones, and that was a big money raiser for it. And the men's club raised money there were stands set up up and down the street here for different events, well, I shouldn't say the events, people selling stuff and that and so on. We had soapbox derby,
Oh, they did?
and we started by the hillside.
Yeah.
And then that ended when some girl who was a soapbox racer, an official soapbox racer, won one year. She came down the hill, and when she got to the finish line, she raised her hands up in the air, let go of the steering wheel, and the car came over. Her car came over and hit the side of a spectator's car, and he threatened to sue for the scratch that was in it and the dent in the hubcap. And that was the end of soapbox racing. So.
I seem to also remember as a kid that different firefighters from the different towns would come into a water. Do you remember that?
Yes.
That was always so much fun. They had tug of war.
Yep. Tug of war.
And then they had the, go ahead and talk about the fire, because I don't remember the details.
That was a water fight, and what was done with 2 poles were set up about the length of this building right now, apart. And there was a cable stretch between them, and an empty beer keg was put on a pulley. And firefighters from one team got on one side of it, and then from another department got on the other side, and they sprayed water. And it was like a tug of war. Whenever the beer barrel got past a certain point, right? That was the winner.
It was very fun to watch. And then there was an actual tug of war too.
Yes,
I believe,
it was.
because I remember my dad's group of guys would always be in it.
And there was a sand pile. That was Ruthie's idea. We used to get RBH, which was Russell, Bud, and Howie. They would come and dump a load of sand on the beach, and we'd bury toys in it the day before. And then the kids would get to dig out the toys, and they got to keep them. I mean, they were just little cheap plastic things and stuff like that, but then the kids would be there all day digging.
That's so fun. And also, at one point, was there some like log rolling contest?
Yes, yes.
I'm digging deep in the memory here.
Yeah. You have to think of those, because I'm not. Yes, there was a log rolling contest. That was one of the events. We had something else in the water too, but I can't remember what it was now.
I know.
But with that, the men's club raised money to do their different events. The men's club built a gazebo in Ellison Bay. Over at it's called a community park now. It was the women's club then, and they built a gazebo there. They built a skating rink building. They built a gazebo up there. They provided playground equipment at the women's club. The playground equipment has been replaced now by the town, but there were a lot of things they spent money on doing. The Ellison Bay Lagoon, the launching ramp. That was a piece of property that was left over when the property was developed from there up to the clearing, and it was all lotted off. And this was a little swampy marsh that was left over. And so they gave it to the men's club back in, it's the late 30s, I think. And I tried to find the deed for it, but I didn't have it. And so the men's club, along with RBH, Russell Hanson came down and he dug. And I remember when I was 48 years, it was 1948, when I was just a little kid. And the men's club talked to Ole Newman, who owned the Vancouver Fishing Camp. He was some relation to the Newmans, owned Lester Newman. And he donated the logs to build the cribs there. It was kind of interesting because when they went in to cut the trees, they drove the horse in, and he walked behind them, and they hooked a log on. He drove it back out, drove the horse back out to the road, walked behind it, went back in. They hooked the log on, they gave him a swat on the rear end, and the horse went went out. They took the reins off, the horse went out, and when he got out there, somebody unhooked it, turned him around, gave him a swat in the back, and he went back in and got the next one. He just went all by himself. They didn't have to have anybody going with him. But then on Sunday, the men's club was down building the first crib alongside the launching ramp there.
So I'm going to circle back to, so you were a surveyor, but you also were and are a locksmith. And
Yes.
helped many stranded people. Talk a little bit about that. I know you helped us with redo our doors here, and it's pretty incredible what you do. It's pretty detailed.
It was something that I did. I started out on weekends opening cars because I was in the Sheriff's Reserve for 36 years, and I probably shouldn't tell you anybody this because my wife's going to see it. But,
She's watching.
Is she commenting already? Hi, Ruthie.
but there was, I was riding along and a gal locked herself out at Fall Festival, and the officer said, and she came up to the officer, well, I don't know if he could open the car. He said, well, sure. So he went to his trunk and got out his tool. And he handed it to me. He said, here, you want to try it? I didn't know anything about it. And he told me what to do. And I opened the door, and she came running up and gave me a great big hug. I said, boy, if you get a hug for doing this, that's good pay. She was cute too. But anyway, I started doing that on weekends, just open cars and stuff. And then at the end of that year, the Sheriff's Department quit opening cars. So I put an ad in the paper so that they wouldn't, otherwise everybody still called the Sheriff's Department, and then they were using the fire pager to page me, which some firemen apparently didn't appreciate. I can see why, because it was all time of the day and night. And excuse me, so I put an ad in the paper and or someplace, and now I started getting calls for everything. So,
I think you told me when you were, because you redid our keys here for our doors,
yeah.
and didn't you do something by correspondence to learn?
Yes, I took a correspondence course originally, and that got me certified. And once I was certified, Wisconsin does not require a license for doing this or any certification. Some states are required to be licensed, other than a business license. But once I got that certification, then I could say I was a certified locksmith, and I could get all kinds of catalogs and get training, and I would go to Chicago every winter for a 3-day weekend, and they had seminars that were put on by the manufacturers, and it was really neat because they'd teach you anything you wanted to know, and they'd tell you everything. And it took very long one year, and they said, yeah, that was great. And we got invited to go to Ireland, because that's where the guest speaker was from that year. We got invited to come over there and stay there. We never went, but because and they were so impressed, and I learned more sitting at the table having a drink after we were done eating, and they tell you, everybody was there, the manufacturers and everything. They would tell you all the information you needed. One of them was a locksmith that designed a lot of products and tools for locksmiths, and the other person that was involved in it was the publisher of a magazine, the editor of the magazine. And the editor died about 4 or 5 years later, and that was the end of it. So.
Oh, wow. So I feel like I'm thinking about a memory, and were you also a constable? Because I believe you pulled me over one time.
What were you doing?
Well, it was actually my muffler was too loud. We had one of the old cars from home, and I think you pulled me over going up the Sister Bay Hill. But at the time, I remember growing up, there were constables in town, and you were at Sister Bay. Was it also Ellison Bay then, or was
No.
or was it just?
Liberty Grove had their own constable for a while. Sister Bay always had a constable. In fact, Ruth's dad was a constable.
Who?
Ruth.
Oh, okay.
And he was a constable along with Barkey. Was his sidekick for a while. And then Lon Lundquist got the job, and then he was no longer doing it, and they were looking for a constable. And I did that while I was in the sheriff's department. But they came along, and there was a lot of requirements. Now you have to have a college degree to be a police officer, and it doesn't say what in. But you have to have a college degree to be a police officer. So they wanted an officer, so they hired me as an officer, and I did that along with the Sheriff's Reserve. I had to keep everything separate.
What years? I mean, it had to be in the 80s then, because that's when
Yes.
they were.
One thing I don't remember what year, it was in the 80s, that's all I can tell you.
He made sure all the kids were behaving is basically what happened. Made sure there wasn't a lot of nonsense going on. That's what I remember.
Yes, that was, the problem was there was a hotel right behind the post office. And the kids liked to gather in the park behind the post office. And they got kind of noisy sometimes, which is normal. And the people that were staying at the hotel would call in. They'd call the sheriff's department and stuff. So basically my job was to keep the kids quiet. But it was interesting. There were a lot more things you got involved in with doing it, but it was keeping the kids quiet. I finally got them to build a volleyball court for them to play in.
All right, we're getting to the end here, and we haven't even taken any questions. Are there other things that you want to talk about? We kind of delved into a few different areas. Based on some of the previous interviews, I delved into some different areas here with Lee, because we've covered some other things in past interviews. But other things that you want to talk about from living and growing up in Door County?
No, I'm just thankful for being here, and I realize that we're out in the sticks in some people's opinion, but I kind of like that, and it was a lot of fun, and I wanted to do things for kids. That was my main thing, is to keep the kids occupied. A lot of trouble, and the Women's Club did something too that was they owned the building over by the Women's Club property, and they didn't own it, but they had control of it for years, and it was just a little log building. But anyway, the Women's Club raised money, and they taught swimming lessons every year. And so we'd ride our bike down and go to swimming lessons. We taught everything right through lifeguard, everything. It paid off for me once. So.
I do remember doing it. Each of the towns had swimming lessons at the public beach, which was really a nice thing growing up, that it was right accessible.
It was. My sister taught swimming lessons when she was in college in Sister Bay for 4 years at least.
So we're kind of low on time because I didn't realize I wasn't keeping track. But do you want to take some questions, a couple questions, and we'll go from there? I know these guys have a question. No, not this time.
Lee, how long did your family have the orchards, like the apples and the cherries?
Yes, we had apples. We had about 40 acres of apples, 20 acres of cherries. But we did a lot of custom cherry picking. Cecil Ford owned 2 properties out in Gills Rock, and they had probably about 60 acres of cherries that we totally took care of. And across from Sequist Market, there was an orchard there that belongs to people by the name of Isaacson, and that was about 10 acres. We took care of that. And the farm just north of that building, that belonged to Matt's, and they had apples there, and we did that for them. And we also went to Washington Island to harvest cherries.
How many years total did your family have the orchards and do?
I think they planted them and must have been around 1930. 34 they bought the property I'm on, and I think they planted them right after that. And they closed the farm down in 73, so because I didn't want to farm. I was too much anticipation. First you worried about the price, then you worried about the frost, and then you worried about whether you're going to get pickers, and then you worried about the price of sprayed open, and it was just one thing after another. And one of the biggest problem with that is that if you got a frost at the wrong time, right around blossom time, your whole annual income is done. That's it. You got nothing for the year. And all it took was one night. And but we did raise beef cattle too. We had a lot of Hereford cattle. And the biggest money maker I ever made when I was in FFA was pigs. I kept 2 pigs over the winter. Each litter had 13, 14 little ones. I sold the sows for what it cost me for the food, to feed them over the winter. And the little ones sold for $10 a piece. So.
Mickey had a question here.
I was wondering if there are any more details in your family's history about how they interacted with John Johnson and the clearing?
Well, my grandfather's book says he was up at the Ellison Bay Orchard Company, and somebody pulled into his yard one day, and it turned out to be Jens Jensen. And he made friends with him, and they just became friends. And they were, from the time that the clearing has had at least 3 fires that I know of. One of the buildings, my grandparents were coming down Ellison Bay Hill, and there was smoke, and so they went over there, and his whole building, his main building, was on fire, and it burned. So then he went and stayed with my grandparents overnight, and the school actually burned twice. I remember that. I was actually at one of the fires. All right. I won't forget them. But he was great friends with him. It was very interesting. He had a relationship with Henry Ford, Jens Jensen did. And he got vehicles from Henry Ford, and we actually ended up with a couple of them. It was kind of neat. So that was back in the 40s, early 40s. So.
Anyone else?
Sally? You were the first responder when my parents reached their 80s and 90s, and we appreciate the number of visits. We had to call 911. You're there in just a few minutes. Always the first one.
Did you hear?
Say thank you.
No, I'm sorry.
She was saying that you were a first responder for many years, and she's thanking you for that.
Oh,
It's Sally back then.
That was started in about 1973. Clyde Casperson decided he wanted to get out of the ambulance service, and so they came to the fire department and was asked if anybody wanted to be an EMT, and 9 of us signed up to do that, become an EMT. We had to go to Sturgeon Bay for the classes. They would pay us for the class time but not the travel time, and they would provide transportation. And so we took the course. We took the first half of it in Sturgeon Bay, and the second half was in Algoma, because Kiwani contributed the other half of the class. It was kind of interesting. We went to Dairy Queen every night after the class.
The big city, huh?
Yeah. And the night that we took our test was, of course, in Algoma. And that was the last night Dairy Queen was going to be open. So we came back, we were coming down house. Lyle was ahead of us. He turned on his red lights on his squad car. So we turned him on the ambulance. Pretty soon it came over the radio. Lyle, is that you? I don't know where those officers were sitting someplace, but so we were in a hurry to get back to Dairy Queen.
Yeah. All right. Actually, our time is up, Lee, but
Okay.
she would like to say something.
I just want to say, one of the things, things go unnoticed up at the top of the hill. And one thing that Lee has done for us for quite a few years is raise and lower the flag at the top of the hill. It's just one of those things, but you have to stay on top of it. He shares that duty. And the other thing that I want to mention is Ruth, his wife, Ruth Telfer, our raffle. She has been very instrumental in our raffle. I just want to mention that. Thank you.
So thanks so much for being here. Thanks to all of you. Our time is up.